last week of class. We made it. Today I'm going to be discussing for my case study politicians' influence on social media, and I'm going to partly touch on how it impacted journalism and how the public viewed them. So for an overview, I wanted to specifically look at Donald Trump's social media presence between October of 2016 and March of 2017, which lines up around, of course, with the election and the time he got elected and sworn into office, and specifically when he mocked a disabled journalist and also attacked journalists online, and how certain media sites were blacklisted from covering his events, of course, as I found through Wesman with Oregon University. So, for context, politicians are more apt to use social media to spread their agendas, as I found through Fitzpatrick. He also stated that politicians can set the tone for what the public thinks about and what journalists talk about. So, with Donald Trump acting almost erratically how he did on social media and just attacking journalists he didn't like and spreading his messages, the public then talks about it more, which then caused more journalists to talk about it, which then caused more problems for the journalists, as then Trump would talk about them and just attack them. So it was just a big circle that everyone went through. This is also not new, as there's always been a little bit of disdain for journalists, as Thornton in his 2013 article had found that journalists have always been seen as biased, dating back to the 19th century, so this is not anything new against Trump. It just didn't help them that he was so hot-headed and not really thinking of his actions as he was doing them. He was more appealing to his supporters and his followers, because we typically know what that whole group looks like. So with this analysis, in our textbook with Arnett et al., they would look at in the ICE theory, which is what people talk about, the highest trending topic. So of course goes back to my previous slide where I mentioned that, as well as the cultivation theory, which is what is spread will shape the minds of those who take it in. So the more Trump talked about media being biased and being against him, and you can't trust certain media outlets and censorship and all this, it impacted, it got in the heads of those who were seeing it, and they're like, oh, maybe he does have a point, maybe the media is biased, maybe this is happening. So then it led to more disdain towards the media, which led to more support for Trump on that end, more people listening to his message, which is not what was trying to be accomplished. Because also in this day and age, media will try to report something as soon as it breaks, which then could cause rumors or errors, which then would support Trump's point about fake news and how nothing is real that they put out. Now with the communication ethics part of this, Trump had very little communication ethics literacy. Since we, the week 7 reflection, I felt like this was a perfect time to bring it up. He viewed it more as himself versus the public versus all of us versus a certain problem. He felt as though he was being personally attacked. He didn't take the time to reflect on anything. And more recently, we see this in the January 6th, the insurrection that happened at the Capitol. He basically incited the violence, told his supporters and followers that we need to take care of it. The election was a fraud. Everyone's against him. And he didn't call off the attack until hours later. And he even called the people that were out there good people. So it didn't click in his mind what was happening when he was doing this, as well as just no sympathy, no remorse. He was just there. Everything he did was specifically for himself. The media faced negative backlash again, as Trump was they're they're against us. So then it was like, oh, we can't really trust the media. Media's biased, but that bias has always been present no matter what. It's just people are only focusing on the news that they want to hear. So then when, like, Trump mentions that, then they actively go out of their way to find the fake news. Also, different mindsets were present between the public. So Trump was saying one thing, one side would agree, and then the other side would disagree. So specifically, like with media or whatever Trump was doing, like when he mocked that disabled reporter, people were like, hey, this is what he did, he shouldn't do this. But people were like, no, it wasn't that specifically, like, it's nothing too bad. So it just created that divide and kind of threw off, like, the communication ethics and what should be present. With the ethical solutions, specifically with, like, Trump and any person in power, really, they definitely need, like, once they get in that position of power, the media and communication ethics training and retraining. So before they fully step in, so, like, say with this election next year coming up, whoever decides to run, they go through a ethics training just to know, like, how to speak, how to appeal, more of, like, the right and wrong things to say, so that they don't end up like how Trump did, as well as, like, retraining each year throughout their term, or forever how long they're in power, because these people are, like, very influential, and they're going to be talked about for a long time, which can then, like, help spread their message and help spread their agenda, as well as the monitoring of social media accounts. This one was more specifically geared towards Trump, as he was just very, not like hateful, but he just said a lot of things that shouldn't have been said on social media, whether that was attacking people or, like, saying the wrong thing or spreading false information, like talking himself up, as well as, like, a lot of hypocritical tweets that went out. Now with the media, they can encourage more of, like, a open dialogue versus divide and criticism between the public, which is basically what happened, as people would report, and then they would just leave it at that. So it led to more divide. Instead, they should open, like, little forums that are monitored, and if anyone says anything super harmful, that person gets banned. But just having that open dialogue with all of their followers and all of their readers to have, like, ideas bounce around and to really harbor that connection and just show, like, hey, we're all living here, let's just discuss what's happening, there's no right, there's no wrong. So our implications, as Bovard pointed out in his 2021 article, censorship on media, started with Facebook as far as I can remember. I remember hearing a lot about that, and then it led over to Twitter with Trump getting his account, like, suspended and banned, and then him creating his own, like, social media platform, which in itself can be harmful because there's nothing there to check what's being spread and what's being put out. The journalistic bias popped out, plus there was a bit of a power struggle, as Trump wanted to seem like he was better than the journalists, and the journalists wanted to report on Trump and being like, no, this is actually what's happening, like, we're not going to let Trump dictate what we put out, like, what's being thought about us. So just, like, all of, basically almost, like, 90% of journalists banded together in order to stop this narrative and the divide. And it showed also many people what a leader should not look like and how they should not talk. With this, just seeing everything that Trump said from before his election campaign to what he was saying during, and then even after he was elected to the time that he got out of office, it showed a lot of people, like, hey, maybe we shouldn't have a leader that talks like this, because that in itself is harmful, and it can spread a lot of, like, wrong messages, as well as create more problems than there needs to be. For suggestions for future research, just look at how different presidents and other people in power, how their communication style and ethics has changed through different eras. So from the newspaper, where there was more time to think about what was being said and to stop before something went out, to the radio, which was like the fireside chats with, I believe, Roosevelt, to television, and I know that was more pronounced with Queen Elizabeth, and then now with social media. So how the ethics and literacy just changed throughout time, as well as like damage control, which then leads to the response time for PR statements and how it differs between different power figures. Looking from like how Joe Biden's response time would compare to Trump's response time, and like the accuracy or the effort that would come out within these statements to like mitigate what's happening, as well as how current communication style and times are impacting journalists. Looking at that view from the public, like what are journalists doing? How is social media impacting them? How is like all these different like people who have blogs and just all the different communication styles compounding into one, how it's impacting like the journalists and how they're viewed in the media. And then to wrap up, once again, the problem was Trump using his platform to punish those he does not like, as well as not facing repercussions from his actions. The solutions that can be made are communication ethics training, social media control and monitoring, and encouraging that open dialogue between everyone around here. And the implications that were shown is what is needed from a powerful figure as well as what is needed from the media. But thank you so much for taking the time to listen to my presentation, and I hope you have a great rest of your semester and your future classes and everything. Thanks!